All right. We are back here at Song of the Day. Remember, the camera's over here. Back with Song of the Day here. Our special guest, Chris Hindman. How are you, Chris?
Doing well, thanks.
Last time we saw you here in the cave was...
Rat,
and then also Cinderella.
Cinderella.
We did Rat and Cinderella, I think, didn't we?
I think. Definitely Cinderella.
Well, anyway, welcome back to the cave.
Thanks. Good to be back.
You got your Smithereens shirt on. That's a great show. Thank you for appreciating my new Van Halen shirt.
Love it.
Don't tell Sarah.
Right.
See how long it takes her to figure that out. So Song of the Day. This is freeform. We're just one take, and we don't know. This could be 14 minutes. We don't even know.
Right.
And it's not even in the morning. It's at night, so could
happy
be
hour.
Happy hour. But here's the story. All right, you can already tell who this is about because you clicked on it. It's about Kansas. But we were at dinner the other night with our wives and friends, and Chris turns to me and says, "Hey, Mark, Kansas is playing blah 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 blah," and I was like, "What? I have not heard the name Kansas as a band in 30 years.
Years and years.
I'm like, they still tour? I'm like, wait a minute, have you even covered them in the cave? And I think, I don't even know if I've covered Kansas in the cave. I mean, I've got over 1,000 episodes. I didn't go back and look. But I am 85 to 90% sure that somewhere along the way I forgot to talk about Kansas.
Right.
And if I did, the only way I did is if I did a Slow Down Sunday on Dust in the Wind. And I'm not even convinced I did that.
Right.
So this is a rock cave first.
So,
doesn't it?
yep.
Yeah. So cheers to us for that.
Right.
And that's thanks to you.
All right.
So then it was like, well, what do we know about Kansas? And,
Right.
Well, it turns out
I went home with homework.
Yeah, right. I was like, we got to find out about Kansas.
Right.
So that's what you did. I mean,
I did.
Right?
I watched the documentary.
How many times did you watch a documentary?
A couple times in the last week.
All right. So all I know about Kansas was they're formed in Kansas, which
Correct.
is nice because
Topeka.
right. Because otherwise their name would have been Utah if they were somewhere else. And tell me more about that.
So, formed in 72, 73 in Topeka, Kansas, a group of guys sort of all knew each other through different relationships, but all brought together by Phil Earhart, who's the drummer, and 6 guys got together and started making music. And where do you want to go from there?
Well, this is in Kansas, like the Heartland, and so when you read about them, you think about Heartland rock, and they are not. That's not what they are. And so I read that at the time that the band's coming out and who they might have been thinking about at the time, or at least compared to, or what they were, whatever it is. There was like Yes, ELP, and Genesis were all doing things, and you told me that they were fans of more like R&B and blues, which is true.
Influences are more R&B and blues, Temptations and James Brown and Otis Redding, guys like that.
Right, but the music that they played was more prog. When you get right down to it,
they were considered more prog, with guitars and synthesizers and the unique addition of a violin.
Right.
Robbie Steinhardt was a lifelong violinist and somewhat classically trained, but that was an interesting addition to this group of guys to have that sound of keyboards, specifically organ and guitars and the violin.
Right, so they start playing, they start touring or doing whatever they can and trying to figure out how to get a demo together, and and then tell me about their demo.
So the interesting story, besides driving back and forth on I-70, in an old school bus, they had enough of their own material to put a demo together, and a guy was able to get it to New York. And that was one of the things that was interesting in the documentary, is that they were sort of stranded on this island of the Midwest. They had no resources to get their music out or connections, but this demo tape made it to New York and actually landed in the hands of a guy named Wally Gold, who at the time was Don Kirshner's right-hand man.
Don Kirshner.
Don Kirshner's rock concert was a big thing on television, and think
about that for a minute. Sorry to interrupt, but they're in the middle of nowhere. They're in Kansas,
They are.
and they're trying to be a rock star. I mean, I didn't
Trying to
check.
get heard,
But
yeah.
how many bands came out of Kansas? I don't even know.
And
But
how many venues
rock
are there
bands.
where other big bands were playing? That was something else. Is that you couldn't even go see a band that had already made it in the hopes of somebody hearing them. So they got this demo dropped off in New York, and they were like, "Great, we're going to get a phone call." Well, 13 months later, I think they said they finally got a phone call. They're playing a gig in a bar, and the phone rings, and the bartender grabs one of the guys in the band and says, "There's somebody from New York that wants to talk to you." And it was this guy, Wally Gold, and said, "Love the violin, love you guys. I want to come out and see you in a couple weeks, put a gig together. I want to make sure you're real. We're looking for talent." And the story goes on that they were trying to figure out how and where to play, how to attract a crowd. They found an opera house in this little hole-in-the-wall town called Ellenwood, Kansas, and they basically put flyers on telephone poles and offered free beer, 25-cent admission, to get a crowd of people to fill this venue, so that when this guy from the record company showed up, that they would look like they were the real deal. And that was what launched their career. He loved them. They had a packed house of drunk farmers, and everybody thought they sounded great. And they were signed to CBS Records.
And they put out their debut in 1974. And their first 3 records were, they generally well received, but no hits,
no
right?
commercial success, no real critical acclaim. Nobody loved it. Nobody hated it. They sold a couple 100,000 albums. And it was interesting. Don Kirshner loved these guys. He had, just the deepest respect and belief that they were going to make it. And it was commented in the documentary that he had initially been just bleeding money trying to keep these guys afloat, but after 3 albums hadn't recouped anything, but said, "You know what? Let's give it one more chance. Let's do another album." And so they went back into the studio, and what came out was their 4th album, Leftover Chore.
October 1976 changed everything for them.
It did. The story about that, real quick, is that they had basically finished recording and rehearsing, and Kerry Livgren, who was the primary songwriter and guitar player, came in as they're basically getting ready to pack up their gear and said, "Hey guys, I got one more song." And they said, "Okay, let's hear it." And lo and behold, it was Carry On, which probably is their biggest song ever.
Absolutely. And we talked about this because...
Funny story.
Because, by the way, the song is not Carry On My Wayward Son, which is what they sing in the song.
Correct.
They never say Carry On Wayward Son. Right now, when you see it, the song is called Carry On Wayward Son. But originally it was Carry On, right?
Right. On the Billboard charts and everything, it was just listed as Carry On.
So all of you saying the name of that song is Carry On My Wayward Son, you're just flat out wrong. And your life is a lie. And if you think the song is called Teenage Wasteland, then that makes sense because your life is still a lie and it's Bob O'Reilly. But it's Carry On Wayward Son. So hard to say because you want to say, exactly. I did it myself. Carry On My Wayward Son. That makes sense, right?